So I grew up in a culture where it was considered poor form to pester. I can remember my grandmother shooing me away from, quit pestering me. Children were to be seen and not heard, and adults were expected to be civil. The people who made a stink or raised a ruckus or incessantly droned on about how they were not getting their way were not people you wanted to hang out with. That behavior was rude and embarrassing. Just follow the rules, keep your composure, and do what's right, and everything will turn out okay. And if it doesn't, too bad, deal with it, because life is rough, right? But this week, we're looking at a story that Jesus told to his followers that praises this very behavior, this idea of persistent pestering, of incessant bothering, of outright begging. We're continuing our sermon series, Tales of the Kingdom, where we're looking at stories, which are called parables, that Jesus used to explain what he meant when he talked about the kingdom of God. Jesus clearly explained other ideas, like love, faith, and gratitude. But when he talked about the kingdom of God, sometimes he was a little coy. It's not coming in the way that could easily be observed, he would say. He told his followers it won't come in the typical institutional forms, and it will lack thrones and palaces and bars. But by looking at Jesus' stories over these past few weeks, we've been able to learn a few things about the kingdom. The kingdom of God is within us. The kingdom of God is found in relationships. The kingdom is in those who aren't like us. And those who embody the kingdom seek the lost. Jesus told his followers that if they had faith the size of a mustard seed, they would be able to tap into this realm that is God's. Why? It wasn't because anything that they were doing on their own or that we do on our own, but it's because God is faithful. The kingdom is the work of God that we've been invited to participate in. But are we willing to engage with God to the end? Will Jesus find us faithful? Will we be persistent in our prayers? Are we willing to pester God? Jesus gives some insight in what is known as the parable of the persistent widow, and it was recorded by Jesus' disciple Luke. Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not lose heart. He said in a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him, saying, "Grant me justice against my opponent." For a while he refused, but later he said to himself, "Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice, so that she may not wear me out by continually coming." And the Lord said, "Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?" As with all of Jesus' stories, there's a lot to unpack here. Luke tells us right up front why Jesus is telling this story, to help people understand the need to pray always and not lose heart. But then Jesus is talking about an unjust judge and a widow. And by the end, he's asking about their faith. So let's just break it down a little bit. In ancient Israel, the reference to judges and widows would have brought to mind specific images to the hearers of Jesus' story. The Israelites would know the story of how Moses charged the very first judges within the Israelite community with the responsibility of declaring God's judgment and establishing peace among God's people. The duty of a judge in Jesus' context was the same, to keep the peace and settle disputes among the people. Widows in the ancient world were incredibly vulnerable and regularly listed with orphans and immigrants as persons deserving special protection. The fact that this particular widow has come to address the judge all by herself, with no family or friends to support her, highlights her extreme vulnerability. Yet despite this extreme vulnerability, she does not take no for an answer. She persists relentlessly. She continues to plead for justice, to the point that the judge gives in because he simply can't take it anymore. Though I have no fear of God or respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice. The unjust judge doesn't fear God. He doesn't respect anybody. He makes his own rules and he administers them in the way that he sees fit, how it suits his own needs and his own welfare. But he is realistic. He realizes he's not going to get any peace until he gives this woman what she wants. This woman who comes to him constantly seeking justice. She's not easily deterred. She keeps knocking. She keeps holding vigil. She keeps pestering. And so, he gives her what she wants, just to get rid of her. Now, because Jesus' parables are often metaphorical, we may be tempted to jump to the conclusion that the unjust judge represents God. But I don't see it that way. God is not like this judge at all. God's nature is to love and to give lavishly. God doesn't give to get rid of us. God created us to be in relationship. God doesn't want to just placate us so we go away. Jesus is making the point that even if the most unjust of judges will finally relent to ceaseless petitions of the defenseless widow, then how much more will God, who is the good judge, answer our prayers? The unjust judge gives way to the woman because of her persistence, just to get her off his back. But God isn't like this judge. God isn't fickle and self-absorbed. And persistent prayer is not being a pest. Jesus invites us to be persistent in our prayers. Not because God is not inclined to answer unless we make a lot of noise, but because this is Jesus' definition of faithfulness. There's one point in Jesus' discussion of prayer that I want to take a closer look at. He says that this woman goes to the judge seeking justice. She's been wrong, and she seeks redress. And Jesus doesn't speak to it specifically here, but it's clear in other accounts and stories that Jesus considers seeking justice an important part of faithfulness. In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus describes the kind of people who will be most at home in the kingdom of God as those who hunger and thirst for justice. Jesus explains that the world founded on injustice will not welcome the work of Jesus' friends, but will fight it tooth and nail. Still, Jesus calls his followers to a justice that surpasses even that of the religious leaders of his day. Jesus advises us not to worry about material possessions or concern, but to keep our focus on the kingdom of God and its justice. Above all else, Jesus grounds this ministry of justice in love of God and love of neighbor. It follows that to be faithful in our prayers, we must be faithful to Jesus' call to justice and to his command to love our neighbor. As Jesus' disciple John wrote in his first letter, how can we say that we love God whom we can't see if we don't love our brother or sister whom we can see? We often take this reference to brother and sister in a very narrow way and simply apply it to our family or to our church community. We're just a fellow Christians. But I would argue that this is too limited. Remember what else John had to say about God's love. Because God so loved the world. God loved the world, not a specific person, not a specific family. God loved the world so much that he sent his son Jesus. And he sent Jesus for everybody, so that everybody would have the opportunity to participate in God's kingdom. The unjust judge in Jesus' story is not involved by God. We could liken the unjust judge, who neither fears God nor respects anyone, to the forces in this broken world that run counter to God's way of being. We can liken this unjust judge to the powerful who abuse their power, exploit the marginalized, and ignore the injustices and suffering around them. From that perspective, we see Jesus is calling us to be persistent in opposing those forces, to be persistent in calling for justice. We begin with persistent prayer. But part of praying is opening ourselves up to be used by God. We are here to embody God's kingdom, to give voice to God's will, and to carry out God's plans to bring justice to this world. Perhaps our persistent pestering will indeed wear down the will and the walls which are barriers to justice. And in the midst of all this pestering, we can rest assured that God is with us. God is active in the world. God hears our prayers and is working in and through us, even when we don't feel it. So why does Jesus end with such an odd question? When the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? I think our response today would be much like his followers' response when he was speaking to them. We'd be like, yeah, we're right here, faithful. But are we? Are we living into Jesus' command to love our neighbor? Really and fully living into that? How often do we fail to persevere and advocate for justice and equality? Are we like the widow in Jesus' story who persistently seeks justice? Or are we the sleepy disciples who fail to follow through on even the simplest of requests? Are we determined to wear down all that opposes the kingdom of God in the here and now? Or are we more willing to keep praying that God will use someone else? Are we too tired, too scared, too overwhelmed to persistently, tirelessly, and doggedly pursue justice in this world? So the question is not whether the Son of Man will find faith when he comes. It's a matter of where he will find faith. And it may not be in the obvious places or ways. Whether Jesus finds persistent faith in our prayers and in our actions is our choice. Are we willing to make a stake for solidarity, to raise a holy ruckus knowing that God is with us? Pray that we will. We're sent by God to live in this world. And that can be tough, but we just have to remember that we are not alone. Jesus calls us to pray always, and Jesus tells us not to lose heart. When we are connected with God in prayer, we will find the strength for the journey. We will find the meaning and the purpose. And when the Son of Man returns, he will certainly find us faithful. Let us pray.